next dialogue or the next episode of A Tale of Two Economies. I have my dear friend and my colleague, the happiness economist from Canada, Mark Anielski, joining me here. And in the previous dialogue, we were talking about, he was telling us about what gave him the idea of developing the economy of happiness and well-being as well. And we just left it off there. So Mark is going to today continue with that, his narration of the well-being of economy and where did we go wrong and why is it that the simple ideas when we talk about economics or finances, the simplest ideas get overlooked by people and there is a resistance against it. So today we have just briefly, Mark will also join in. Today, briefly, we will also discuss, Mark will tell us about this idea of a public bank that he's working on with his Indigenous First Nations people. So welcome, Mark. Good morning. It's Mo Canada.
Good morning, Anika. Good morning.
How are you feeling today?
Keep my coffee voice out of the way.
Okay.
I'm feeling well, thank you.
Good. I mean, I'm quite excited to share this with people. We've known each other for 6-7 years now, so I can map it out what you are doing and what does that mean that, economy of happiness and well-being. When we say well-being, people would think about, the well-being, physical well-being, or even mental well-being. Your economy of well-being entails 5 natural capitals. So last time we briefly just touched upon that. So can you please maybe explain today what was the need for that?
Sure. So, with my accounting and economics background, as well as forestry, so I have 3 kind of disciplines. I started to examine, this was many years ago now, the flaws in our accounting systems that when we talk about assets or capital, are we just limited to one form of capital? And what is the word wealth? So we talk, we use the word wealth maximization and all this, right? But when I went back and reread Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, actually, I reread it as a PDF, and I said, where did Adam Smith find the word wealth? And it turns out that the word wealth comes from the 13th century Old English word, wella. Wella means well-being. And TH, the letters TH, means the conditions of. So I'm like, wait a minute. You mean wealth means the conditions of well-being? That's what it means? And of course, health is a close cousin of the word wealth. And then I added the word genuine. Well, what does genuine mean? To live according to values, to virtue, to characteristics of goodness, let's say. So, of course, pretty controversial. It's like, who are you to say what is genuine? And who are you to say what constitutes well-being or accounting for well-being? But if we then go back to 500 years ago, Luca Pacioli, Leonardo da Vinci, who kind of came up with the bookkeeping system, which we still use today, which they probably borrowed from the Sumerians and, the glorious times of Islam when mathematics was sacred and tied to music and frequency, all that stuff. Anyways, so as a kind of economic historian, I came up with this understanding that there's nothing new here. It's restoring what we've lost, which is the meaning of the words. Okay. So of course, then happiness means well-being of eudaimonia, from Greek, well-being of the soul, well-being of the spirit. So you start to put Humpty back together again, and you say, gee, we could design a more compelling accounting system, not just for companies, but for nations, that measures the well-being conditions of the human capital, the social capital, which is culture and relationships, the natural capital, which is land and environment, and then the built capital, which is infrastructure, and then, of course, financial capital. So there's 5 capitals, and the word capital, actually, if you look it up etymologically, closely aligned with the word wealth. So here we have it, almost a circular. So it was capitalism. Well, you could say it's the totality of genuine wealth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, all right, from an accounting perspective, how do we measure, like when we do an audit for a company or anything, we look at the physical conditions of the assets of that company. So you're selling cars. I want to know how many, vehicles are in the lot and what's their age, what's their condition. And then I worry about the market value of that. So this is the whole model I've kind of constructed, saying this is just kind of common sense. It's not revolutionary. But the truth is that nations do have incomplete balance sheets. They don't treat the land as an asset, really. I mean, maybe because the fencing of the commons, which happened in England eons ago, resulted in us as farmers or whatever, who actually participated in the commons and shared in these collective assets.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
Driven
Yeah.
into London to work in the factories. So hence the Industrial Revolution took off, because they dispersed us from the commons and put us into a profit maximizing machine. So
Yes.
we have a lot of trauma to deal with.
The natural resources you are referring to have been capitalized as well, right?
Absolutely. And captured by law. It's a failure to uphold the principles of accounting as they were conceived by Pacioli and Da Vinci. Now, Da Vinci, he was constantly thinking in sacred geometry, right? He was, right? You know how brilliant he was, but no one knows that, oh, he was one of the co-authors of this treatise on double entry. And Luca, who was a Franciscan monk from, advisor of the Pope, he was a mathematician. In Venice, he was advising Venetian business guilds. So in Venice, back in the 15th century, they had guilds, right? Cooperatives.
Yes.
And guilds didn't operate by maximizing profit. They shared in the collective benefit of their enterprise. And if there was anything left over, it was called residual. It wasn't called profit. And then the question was, well, what do we do with the residual? Do we give it to the poor? Do we retain it ourselves? It's called retained earnings, or, these are the decisions we would be making at year end. But today it's like, oh, the shareholders have the primacy, that we owe them dividends, and we don't care about the environment because they're not our shareholder, right?
No.
So here we are. So I'm just trying to, restore, I guess, what was perhaps lost. Maybe we just fell asleep and lost our way.
Yeah. So we lost the soul of the economy.
We lost the soul. We lost the plot.
We lost the plot. But this is what it is, that I think I've mentioned to you before as well. The word for human is insan, which comes from the root, the etymologically, it means the one who forgets. So we always forget. And, it's mentioned in the Quran as well, that man will always be in loss. And what is that loss? It's like, we can't see the abundance around us. In our minds, it's that scarcity and artificial scarcity. We keep on creating that. And I was only thinking yesterday that, I've been just stuffing myself too much nowadays. And I thought, oh my God, how much food do I have in my house? My cupboards are full, my fridge is full, freezer is full, and there's so much to eat and consume. And still we kind of complain about, that there's doom and gloom. I'm not saying that the economy is not in a brilliant state, but yes.
But you've nailed it, because for me now, what we're dealing with is kind of a world of relativism, narcissism, and in the reality of abundance. Okay, so what's happening is, I think we're getting caught up in emotion, and what I'm describing is probably a very intellectually sound framework for real management, and not to belabor that word, and yet people say, oh, but I'm too busy with my emotions and freaking out about what's going on over here and there.
Yes.
Or I'm so busy paying my mortgage, I'm stressed out all the time. So we find ourselves, I think, caught up in emotion, and we like stop the emotion, like put the emotion on pause for a minute and take stock, count your blessings, right? Like think about,
I would
yeah.
I would say it's not just emotion, it's the panic that has been created around us. You remember that book by Naomi
Naomi Klein,
Klein? Yes,
shock doctrine, yeah.
yes, that's it. So every day it's the same tactics, I think.
Shock, another shock, right?
Every day, and we are in this panic mode always, like, oh my God, what is going to happen to the world? I'm like, nothing will happen to the world. It's God's world.
Yeah.
I
Is
mean, it's
Anika
his
alive
world.
today? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Anika woke up this morning. Great. Okay.
Yeah,
My
plus
friend
it's
is okay.
God's world. I mean, I'm just a visitor here. Who am I to decide? I mean, people have
That's
also,
right.
people have forgotten. This is why the other dialogue I've started is God conscious organizations. And I say humanity with divinity, because there's too much talk about humans. And we have overlooked all the other species. I mean, we've literally killed them, destroyed them, but we've also forgotten that divinity was the main. Our anchor was that we leave it.
That's who we are. I mean,
yeah, the world belongs to God. Who am I to just worry about it? He'll save it.
Well, and that's again the spirit of happiness. Like, if happiness is well-being of the soul, then what is my purpose? What is my vocation, my inner calling? If not to love, if we believe we were created in the image of love, if God, Allah, whatever, right, the creator, then why are we so asleep to that reality, that truth? Why are we freaking out? And now we've got artificial intelligence. I'm like, what happened to original intelligence? What happened to like
wisdom?
Yeah.
So coming back to wisdom, maybe wisdom traditions, I know that you are working with the First Nations people at the moment, and you are advising them to start something that you and I would call a public bank. Like, remember, initially we used to say, and you actually were the one when I shared the idea of Ahuat in Pakistan, and you said, yeah, we can be each other's bankers. So
right.
I'm not rejecting that there shouldn't be banks, but what we are also saying is, the governance we know, plus the banking system, which is so corrupt, and it's based on all those, the traditions which are not really the banking traditions. Banking started, you are the historian, you can expand on that. So it was about pooling in our monies and then utilizing it for public utility or humans, right?
Yeah.
We also lost the way. So tell us about the concept of a public bank. What are you proposing to them?
So, this is a very deep, long conversation, but most people don't even know what we know. Maybe what a bank is. Bank, creates credit from, takes their deposits and maybe even invests their money. But a public, so that most banks are privately held banks, they're corporations, right, which have a pretty clear mandate what to do, maximize profits for shareholders, and yeah, you could charge interest on loans. Now, a public bank is different in the sense of it is collectively held by the people of a jurisdiction. Say, the Public Bank of Glasgow would be 100% owned by each Glasgowian, however you say that, right? And yeah, each citizen would have one vote, let's say, and they're for one share. And what does that mean? That we collectively share both in the abundance of the collective assets of Glasgow or Edmonton, where I live, and or Alberta. In fact, where I live in the province of Alberta, we have one of the oldest public banks on Turtle Island in North America, which is called the Alberta Treasury Branch. Now, it was founded in 1938 when Alberta was bankrupt. We thought, our premier at the time thought, well, I'll be creative and let's just create our own money, right? We could just print our own money. We'll be backed by the assets of the province. So he was already thinking about generating wealth way back then, our premier. And it was guided by a guy named C.H. Douglas in England, right? Major C.H. Douglas, who was the founder of social credit, the idea of social credit.
Yeah.
And so that whole, the spirit of public banking was born literally in Alberta here, 1938, and in 1919 in North Dakota. And so what it meant is that the creation of credit or loans by the public bank would be 100% backed by the assets of the province or the state. That then means you need a balance sheet to reflect the true, genuine wealth of the state. Because the creation of loans is actually really simple. It's magical. It's like for $1 of $100 of equity, I can create 10 times more in loans. And magically, I create credit. That's how banking works in very simple terms. In the public bank, I'm suggesting is we can do this. We can play the same game, leverage that $100 of equity. And equity isn't just cash now; it's also these other assets, right? And it's relationships and trust and all those other intangible assets. And we're going to create credit for ourselves to provide the liquidity to do what? To support our enterprises, not in excess. We want good businesses. We want businesses that flourish. We want people who flourish, right? We want the land to be healthy. So these are now the objectives of this, what I'm calling a well-being bank, a well-being public bank. There is no such thing on the planet yet. There's no well-being bank yet, but that's what I'm proposing. And some of the First Nations that I work with, and there's a lot of First Nations. There's 640 distinct First Nations in Canada, but they only represent maybe 3 to 4% of the total population. So they're tiny, right? But one of these nations can easily adopt this model. So a nation could be 400 members to like the biggest one in Canada is 10,000. So that's the concept, is that the well-being bank is held collectively by the members. No one can control it. No one can dominate it. The shareholders are you and I. And we then get all the benefits of what private banks do every day today, right? They create loans out of nothing. They take deposits. But this is a kind of a circular, it's a different, and it's just an instrument in a larger financial architecture of self-determination. That's what this is, right?
So how is it different from a credit union?
It's very similar to the credit union, except in this case, it is the state and we as citizens, no matter, credit union is membership based, and that's fine. I love credit unions. I totally support credit unions, but credit unions are only, of course, relevant to those who sign up to be a member of the credit union. But I'm saying by the fact that you live in Glasgow, you're automatically, right, a member of the Public Bank of Glasgow, automatically. If you move to London, you're no longer a member, right? But the point is that we become each other's bankers in that real sense, and we share both in the bounty and in the risk too. Now, it raises some interesting questions on governance. Who's going to make decisions? And we know what happens so often in cooperatives is a very small percentage. Even if you have, everyone has a $10, share, very small percentage of people actually vote on the board, or they don't really participate. But and they don't necessarily understand the benefit of being a cooperative. So this is the issue of governance. So yes, if all of us have a vote in our public bank, how do we decide on the lending policies? Who do we give money? Who do we lend money to, right? Do we want, how many barbers or carpenters do we really need in Glasgow? These kind of decisions would have to be made, because right now, those decisions are not being made. The central bank makes none of the decisions I'm talking about now. It just says, okay, we're managing inflation and we need to keep creating more credit. Oh, and then sometimes we do like crazy things like derivatives, or we start our Silicon Valley Bank and we're like, whoa, and then suddenly
which has collapsed now.
It just collapses, and now Credit Suisse is at risk. Like, come on, they're always playing. It's a casino, right? Everyone's playing in the casino.
It's
So
2008 all over again, right?
it's all over again, and nothing changes. We don't learn anything, and
We don't want to change.
we don't
I
want
mean,
to change.
it's as simple as that. Because what you have described is exactly what the Islamic concept of Islamic economy
Yeah,
and financial system. Banking, I mean, I argue there was no concept of banking in Islam
right.
when it all started. Exactly what you are saying,
And
that it would be endowments and, pooling in funds, and we call it waqf, and, Baitul Mal, which was the state would have a public bank, exactly like you are
so
saying, based by
I think
assets.
that this is a really important history lesson, because it wasn't until the Bank of England was founded in 1695 by William of Orange of Amsterdam, who basically brought a private banking cartel to do what? Because the king couldn't finance the wars, and so they went, oh well, let's just rely on these private bankers who, probably better at managing money, maybe.
Mhm.
And so we gave up on what the British had for 800 years, called a tally stick.
Mhm.
It was it was a stick that represented, it was the king issued the stick. It had an equivalent, like, exact mate, right, which was kept by the treasurer. So you couldn't counterfeit these sticks or you get beheaded, right? But the stick represented purchasing power, and it was the most stable time in all of British economic history, from William the Conqueror all the way to 1840 or something, when the fire in the Parliament happened, when they burned the tally sticks, right? Because so what happened is you went from this very stable system in which a monarch determined the money supply, right? But in the case of your example too, and First Nations, what did they have? They had seashells. They had wampum. It's called wampum. It was seashells. That was their unit of exchange, right? Of currency. But really, that even wasn't money, because their whole culture was an exchange economy, right? Of mutual sharing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they had to work things out. You have salmon, you have buffalo, you have, you're better beaters, you're better drum makers, you're, like, and so was it complicated? Probably, but
It's called the wisdom of cooperation. So
yeah,
a scholar from the Indo-Pak region, South Asian region, which was India before, his
yeah,
name was Shah Waliullah, and he's written about that. I
right.
mean, interestingly, all those scholars, they were theologians or scholars and philosophers first, and then they wrote about economics. So
No,
there is no concept of equality rather than equity in Islam. As in, we could be on either, I'm not going to use the term hierarchy because it has that negative connotation for some reason, I don't know. But we are not all on the same level. I mean, you could be intellectually better than me, and I could be creatively better than you. So we pool in our skills as well. So we are not saying all of us can make the same amount of money, or, I mean, before managing wealth, it's about how do we create wealth together, right?
yeah,
So
how do we, and the issue of equity is really important. So, everyone's like, well, Mark, what's your vision of just, the inequity that occurs? I said the inequity occurs mathematically. You can see how it occurs over time with power of compound interest. That's as simple as that. If you start with 1 million and I start with 100, you're going to be way ahead of me in no time, and I will never catch up, and you'll just get more and more powerful. But in a society where we have a protocol for redistribution, yeah, you might have been luckier for the last 5 years, but I had a terrible 5 years. But how do we as a culture say, you know what, Anika, like, I have more than enough. Like, I got enough art, and you need my chapati recipe or something, right? Like, I'll give it to you. It's got no property rights, but the spirit of sharing, right? And I think we have You know,
And
in
this is
Islam, I
where
know.
sorry, I'm interjecting again, but this is where the concept of benevolent loan comes in.
Right, right.
People say it's interest free, but it's not interest free. It's actually given through the benevolence of your soul or of your heart, that you feel like, I have abundance here, but now I can share. But why do I
Yeah.
have to make
So
money on the money I'm sharing with you?
so let's riff on that subject of trust, because we wanted to talk about that
Yes.
and say,
Yeah.
okay, we have these great ideas, you know, public bank, well-being bank, love bank, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. You don't even have to call it a bank, just sharing
Yes.
circle, something,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
that people go, oh my God.
Reciprocal endowment. This
Yeah.
is what the term I used in my book when I was writing for Ahud. So
So
it's
that,
about reciprocity as well. Mhm.
right. So I see the challenges, and we agree on this, is trust, right? So if you say, okay, and I've had this experience, you know, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I came back having studied this interest-free bank in Sweden. My friend Yakub, you know, Omar Yakub and others, we sat around, we said, do you want to, let's create an interest-free bank here, right here at the restaurant, right? And we had several lovely conversations, but you know what it came down to? Ultimately, we never did it. Mainly because none of us needed credit. We were all debt free. So we were like, well, we actually wouldn't be even lending to each other because no one in the circle needs anything. But maybe our neighbor over that table needs, you know, they got a student loan at $20,000 at 8%.
Yeah.
And we want to be gracious and we're like, come over here, we'll lend you money at 2%. How about that? And they'll be like, yeah, of course, right? Now the question is, how do you create the conditions of trust, even in that potentiality of where you're like, oh, this thing could really take off, right? Suddenly the big banks are out of business because we have found a way of sharing and trusting, and we have
I
protocols
like
too.
your confidence, Mark.
So in your case, Ahwad, like, okay, it works really well in a more financially maybe poorer place on the planet. But in more wealthy Glasgow, in your diaspora community of Pakistani Muslims, you can't get people to sign up to this model. And the question is, why is that? Is that we're too prosperous? Or what is it about trust that that sort of stops us from imagining, even if I tell you, you know, you're going to save thousands of dollars on avoided interest costs that you would otherwise have with this Bank of Scotland mortgage or whatever, you know, even then you still can't get people to go, okay, I'm in, I'm committed, right?
Can we just quickly mention about Ahud Foundation, because there could be people who don't know about Ahud Foundation and what their model is about. So it's about giving benevolent loans to each other. You share your abundance with me and you don't charge me interest, nothing. But then out of, you know, if my need has been fulfilled, I return that loan and I would maybe add a gift, you know.
Right.
It's reciprocal. It's the reciprocity. I'm saying, okay, because you're not charging me anything, as human beings, you know, we love to share, we love to give as well.
Absolutely.
I mean, I can't always be the taker. So I'm saying, okay, Mark, I'm giving you this, you gave me $100, it's 110 now, right? And now we put the 10 aside and it's kind of circulating again. That 100 goes to the next person and we keep on accumulating, you know, the top up. This is how Ahud Foundation have now given loans to 5.8 million families in Pakistan. But it can happen in Pakistan.
It's fantastic.
It cannot happen anywhere else. And they don't call themselves a bank. You know,
well, that's the point. Exactly. They didn't call themselves a bank.
Where the money is coming from. The money is coming from you and me. People, as you said, that people who can give, share your abundance. I mean, it's such a simple concept and it's successful. But imagine starting it in Glasgow or in Alberta or in Nigeria. And what is lacking is the trust. Now they have 99.9% recovery rate.
Right.
I mean, I've actually spoken to the borrowers myself, and they would come back and give the loan themselves. Give it
Right.
back.
See, exactly. And the same
So I
happens with the
was
yacht
I
bank.
was I was speaking to someone here, and the first question he said was, "Oh, but it's too risky. What happens if somebody wouldn't come back and they can make an excuse and say, 'Oh, I was unwell, I couldn't work.'" And I said the concept of a benevolent loan is that you don't pressurize the loanee as well. When they can pay out of their own benevolence, they should also pay. It's a very ethical, it's basically virtue-based concept that,
Exactly.
because you are responsible to your creator, and you won't go astray. That is, you have to instill that values or that spirit of benevolence as well to others before you start.
Both
But
both in both instill but experience. I think what you're saying is it's one thing to write. I mean, I can stand on my head talking about Catholic social teachings and virtue, like the holy virtues. And as Thomas Jefferson said, without virtue, happiness cannot be. So are we a culture that has forgotten virtue? Or do we have to continually be schooled by our imams and our priests and our pope or whatever?
yeah.
So, there's something called charity. There's something called prudence. Well, where's prudence gone in what's the commentary on the Silicon Valley Bank with respect to prudence? What didn't we understand as an obligation, as a collective obligation, and but what you're saying is the lived experience of Ahuat has been wildly successful. Default rates of unprecedented, so low, like no bank could brag about those kind of non-performance rates. And you still get people keeping their money in, putting more in, right? And this is the amazing story about your story and the Yacht Bank story. It's like, why would people not just pull out their money out of the Yacht Bank once they finish paying the loan? I don't know, because they feel like I benefited, so my neighbor, I hope, can benefit if I just keep my money in the bank and that's available to a future borrower, right? I don't know what, maybe that's the good news that we already see from these experiences, that they do work.
But there's a catch, Mark, that it was preached to those people, this value or the virtues, not preached, just a reminder that, you have to sit in a circle and then, regurgitate all those values, and you say, this is how Islam or the Prophet was doing, and Allah has asked you, this is your responsibility, social, moral, religious responsibility. And that was the reason they were dispersing loans in places of worship, like mosques, churches, and so saying that you are present here, and Allah is the witness here. So I think that also worked. But again, it worked because Pakistan is a faith-based country, as rhetorically we say that. People still believe in, they are very faithful to religion, or they follow.
So this is the crux of it, is, have we become cultures without religion, without virtue, in a kind of state of relativism, nihilism? Is that what we become? Like, apologetic for, oh, I can't offend my Muslim brother or sister because, well, England was founded by a half Viking, it was a Christian nation. It's always been okay, maybe it's 70% Christian, but there's still 10% who are Muslim, or 20%, so we
Hindus or Jews or
and the Jews, like, but guess what? If you look at our common roots of our ethics, right? We're come from the same Abrahamic faith.
That's it.
Even if you look at Buddhism, you're like, well, like
I like the term monotheistic. If we go beyond Abrahamic now, the more I'm nowadays exploring, and I feel maybe this is the way. when we say monotheistic, I know people get also offended by that, because it kind of just refers to, you have to believe in a God, right? But monotheistic, even Hindus have this monotheistic view
Sure they do.
of they could have thousands of deities and avatars basically, but
That's
they
right.
believe in one God. So do Sikhs do, and even Buddha was also referring to the spirit, and indigenous people also do. So
They
it
call it, yeah, they use the Great Spirit, right? Monto. I
yeah.
mean, it's the same thing. And again, it's like, so the only thing I can conclude is that we've lost the word, right, the Islamic word for humans. We've
Some.
lost, in some, like, we've lost our way. We've lost the
We've
essence of who
lost,
we.
the memory. Our memory is kind of gone. We were, the covenant we took. We've all
Yeah.
forgotten that. Mm.
So that's why it's, and we started this during COVID, this conversation. What do we do next? Like, what now? Like, we're not stuck.
No.
Our creativity is so incredible. That's what God creator gave us, like unbelievable creativity.
Especially
And
now in this era,
yeah,
we can now imagine many galaxies. Imagine it wasn't before. Now we can even see through all these, telescopes and this latest technology. So we can see there are many universes and galaxies. So our creativity has expanded. Our consciousness has expanded. We can now map it out, but we are still kind of stuck, and we are weighed down. So Earth is the dense energy, and we are kind of weighed down. And this very animalistic, we have an animal soul as well. And what I was referring to, eating so much, gluttony, and it's that animal soul which keeps on saying more, more, more. And you have to, keep on appeasing that soul. So I think, yes, we should conclude, but we will also keep this conversation going in the
yeah, no,
next
this is
dialogue, where you can tell us operationally what is required or not required of a public bank. I mean, we say that there has to be governance, and especially with the First Nations people. How did you start this? So we can continue this conversation about public bank, or you and I could be each other's bankers,
that's
sharing
right.
our abundance with each other. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Mark.
Thanks, Anika. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.